Hello, Jim Lynn here. Welcome back to the workshop. In this episode I'm going to be cutting the tenons, but before I get to that, let's just review the mortises that I've cut so far. So each of the vertical legs has a mortise, and each one of those is exactly the same size or as near as I can make it. And the fourth mortise is in this short cross rail, and not only is that a different size, but it runs across the grain, as you can see there. And I'll get to the reasons for that in a future episode. But at the moment I just need to check the alignment of these three leg mortises. And by that I mean, what is the distance between this top edge of each of the mortises and the bottom of the leg? Because that's going to dictate the future alignment of the entire assembly once I get it all put together. So let's go ahead and do that now. Here I've got all three legs set up side by side. There's a reference edge on this side and another reference edge on this side, and I've got all the reference sides facing upwards. Now what I need to check is that the distance between this reference end here and the top end of the mortise here are the same for all three legs. So before I go any further, I'll check that I've got the bottoms of the legs all in alignment, and I can do that with this straight edge here. Just offer it up, push the legs until all three are touching the straight edge, and now I know I've got all three of them in perfect alignment. So now I can go ahead and take a reading with my set square. So I'm going to start by laying it down on this right hand edge first of all. Now I'm just going to slide it up until it covers the edge of at least one of the tops of the mortise, and so it's just covering the edge here. And I can see I've got a fraction of a gap left on this one, so I'm going to say that they're okay. Now let's move on to the other side, and it's pretty much perfect there. So I'm going to say that all of these legs mortises are in perfect alignment as close as I can get them, so I can move on to the next stage. Okay, this is the short cross rail, and as you can see I've already put a centre line on it, and I had to do that because I had to cut this mortise here. This is where the tenon of the long cross rail will slide in like that. So that's basically my starting point, this centre line, which means that somewhere out here there are two tenons buried. But before we excavate those, let's have a look at the design. Here's a side elevation of the short cross rail. You can see that central mortise straddling the centre line. Now the purple box is the portion of the rail which will be visible between the legs, and the green boxes either end of that are the tenons, and the orange boxes are the waist. Now these orange boxes will remain attached to the tenons until I'm ready to fit them, and you'll see why it needs to be that way when I come to cut the tenons. Now the centre line is going to be key to my marking out, so if the blank cross rail is 828mm long, this puts the centre line at 414mm from either end. Now the purple box is 472mm long, so marks have to be made 236mm outwards from the centre line. Now each tenon is 77mm long, and that includes 5mm fat or so to allow for flush trimming after assembly. So marks have to be made 313mm from the centre line for a total finished length of 626mm. Now the reference side and reference edge of each tenon will be 17mm below the corresponding outer surfaces, but the face sides and face edge of the tenons, they'll be left fat to allow for trimming once I come to fit the tenons into the mortise. Now I can get some of these numbers transferred onto the workpiece. So I've got the centre line set on the workpiece already, and on this ruler I've set a ruler stop at 236mm. Now that's the important dimension, that's the inner end of the tenon, and that's the one I've got to get precise. The other ruler stop is set at 313mm, that represents the outer end of the tenon, which is going to be cut off eventually. So if I set my ruler end onto the centre line and just carefully hold the ruler stops down, I'm going to make a mark with the pen initially, not the marking knife, and now I can go ahead and do that at the other end and then get the masking tape set on. Now that I've got the masking tape set, I need to mark up again, but this time with the marking knife. So I'm using the same ruler. I'm going to turn it upside down this time so that I can apply more pressure over the ruler stops. So I'm going to take this end and hold it tight against that centre line. Applying downward pressure over the ruler stops, I take the marking knife with the bevel to the inside, the waste side, hold it tight against the ruler stop, make an indentation, turn it round, bevel to the waste side, tight against the ruler stop, make an indentation. Now I'm going to do the same at the other end, and I'm going to use the set square to mark right round the entire work. I've got the workpiece set so that I'm going to be working off either the reference edge or the reference side. In this situation I'm bearing on the reference side and marking on the reference edge. You can see that I've cut away the masking tape so that the stock of the square bears directly on the wood and is not held off by the tape. So I'm just going to place the square onto the reference edge at the minute, with the reference side being the bearing surface. I'm going to drop my marking gauge into the little slot and slide up the square like that, and then holding everything tight here, go ahead, make a light cut across the wood and another deep cut. Now I'm going to be making an indentation here, slightly deeper, and then at this end as well, and you'll see why later. So now that I've done that cut, I can transfer over to the other side. I'm going to use my left hand for this. Yeah, sometimes you've got to be able to use your left hand in awkward situations. Slide the square up, hold everything tight, make the cut light first of all, slightly firmer at this edge, nice and light across the work, and slightly firmer at that edge, and then a final cut. Laying the workpiece down now so that it's sitting on the face side. The face side is underneath, the reference side is facing upwards, and I'm going to put the square against the reference edge. Then, taking my marking knife, I'll drop it into that extra deep indentation that I made at the end of the last cut, slide the square up, apply the pressure on the square firmly, 1, 2, 3 points, and then make a light cut with the marking knife. You have to be careful here. It's easy to forget that you have to hold the square tightly and let it move. So I think that's deep enough. So what I'll do is just indent that far end a bit more, and then do the same using the left hand. Even though I can do it, I can never actually get used to using my left hand. Drop the marking knife into that indentation, slide the square up, hold everything tight. You're more likely to move the square when you're using your left hand like this. So concentrate your thoughts on keeping that pressure. That should be deep enough, and again, hold tight with my right hand, make that indentation at that far end. Now I'm going to rotate the work again through 90 degrees. This time I've got the face edge facing upwards, so the reference edge is underneath, and the reference side is going to be my bearing surface, and that's on this side. So I'll set the square bearing against the reference side, so I'm always using the reference sides to use as a bearing surface. Take the marking knife, drop it into my little indentation that I made, slide up the square, make sure the pressure's tight, make the cut. And then go over to the other side, swap hands. Awkward though it may be, it's still the best way to do it. Drop in the knife, come on, slide up the square, there we go, hold everything tight, concentrate more on that right hand pressure. So now I've got the reference side on the underneath and the face side upwards, and I'm using the reference edge as my bearing surface. Now this is actually the moment of truth, because if I've done all my preparation correctly and taken as much care as I possibly can, then these two cuts here and here should line up. Let's find out. Let's do the first one. So square onto the reference edge, drop in the knife, slide it up, hold everything as tight as I possibly can, make that light cut, deepen it up a bit. There we go. I'm not even checking that yet. I dare not look actually. Let's do the other side first with the left hand. Drop it into my slot. There it is. Slide up. Now don't lose concentration at this final hurdle. Big pressure with the right hand. Make sure that you're concentrating on the pressure and not the knife. The knife just has to be drawn across the work. It'll make the cut if it's sharp enough. There we go. Right, let's have a look at this edge. So how did we do? Did our careful preparation pay off? I would have to say yes. You can see that this line from the face side meets the face edge precisely, I would have to say, bearing in mind that these two lines came at each other from a different direction, and that is as precise as you can get it. So I'm very happy with that. And this is the important cut, because this is going to be the inner face of the tenon, the important one, the one that has to fit precisely against the leg. On the other side, this is going to be cut off anyway, but it still meets. It's not quite as perfect as the other one, but it's within a fraction of a millimetre. So I would say that's pretty good for the size of the workpiece, and it just proves that we took great care with our preparation and it pays off in the end. I'm going to be removing most of the waste with this 25mm chisel. So to help with that process, I'm going to make 4 saw cuts. So I'm going to mark out for those based on the width of the chisel. So first of all, I'm going to make a mark just inside my cut line. I want to protect that cut line as long as possible. So we'll make our first mark there. And make another one against the other line, like that. Now it just so happens that this marker width is about the same width as the kerf of my saw. So what I'm going to do is put the corner of the chisel right in the middle of that line and make a mark right in the middle of the corner. Transfer to the other side, right in the middle of the line, make a mark in the middle of the corner, and then I can square those lines across. Typical of the marker pen to start to dry up. Right, now I can make some saw cuts. One thing I'm very conscious of is not going too deep when I'm making these saw cuts. So to help me, I've made a line on the saw at 15mm, and to back that up, I've set some masking tape 15mm down from the top edge. I'm cutting right down the centre of the black line. So I've made a line straight across first of all, and I'll start to deepen it. I'm down at that line now. Let's carry on. Down at my tape here. Almost at my tape there. There we go. Now I've got this freshly sharpened chisel, the 25mm chisel, so all I need to do is give it a dunt with a hammer. You see the chips just fly off quite easily, like that. And you can see because I've made these saw cuts, I'm not getting any side to side splintering. And I'll just start working on this side as well. Take some quite big chunks initially, fairly confident it's not going to split. But what I don't want to do is go too far over to this side because it just might split over. Like that. Probably just do it freehand now. So David Charlesworth used to call this technique of starting from one side and going to the other side as tenting. The idea is to try and avoid any kind of splitting at the opposite side. Right, I've come round the other side now, and I'm just going to do the same thing but from the opposite side. You can see why I need these new legs. This workbench is not stable at all. I need to take a little bit more care from now on. You can see how I'm gradually flattening this surface. What I'm trying to avoid is divots like this. That could go too deep into the tenon. Now you can see how I'm bracing my hand against the wood and gripping the chisel between the thumb and forefinger so that it provides a bit of resistance, and this way you get good control. Almost through the other side. Means we're pretty much close to level there. Let's keep going with this side. Get as close as I dare to the green tape. Almost there as well. Now we'll finish off the central portion. The reason I'm wearing the glove is that I've had a flare-up of dermatitis on the fingertips. I think it's caused by the wood. It's a theory anyway. So I'm trying to protect myself from the wood. And these gloves are disposable, so it doesn't matter if they get ripped. pretty much down to the flat surface now. Now, if you remember, this tape is only at 15mm, and I've left the chiselling a little bit shy of that tape on both sides. So I'm going to finish that off with the router plane. Right, the first thing I need to do is to remove this masking tape because it's served its purpose, and if I leave it on it'll interfere with the way the router plane bears on the surface. So what I need somewhere on the work is a reference that I can go back to reset the depth of my router plane blade. So I just use the marking gauge with it set to 17mm, and I just make a deep line, and then if the router blade should slip, I just come back here. Okay, so this is how I do it. I bring the router plane up and hold the base firmly against that reference side, and then turn the adjustment knob until I can just drop the tip of the blade into the mark, and turn it until it just engages on the far side of the slot, and then I can turn the knob here to tighten the blade into the plane. And also I've got a depth gauge here, and I want to tighten that up as well. And now that's me ready to go. Right, I'm going to begin by retracting the blade quite a bit. I've got my depth stop set, so I'm not worried about coming back to that critical depth. I want to retract the blade so that when I've put the router plane flat on the surface it doesn't touch anything. Then I'm just going to extend the blade until it first catches something, which is about there. Then a little bit more to lift it off the surface. Then I can lock that down like that. Then I can make my first cuts. Starting here, we'll just come in from this edge and start peeling away. Now I've got quite a significant amount to do, maybe 3 or 4mm. It shouldn't take long with a sharp blade. Now what I don't want to do is go right through the other side. Famous last words. So the way I'm doing this is keeping pressure on one knob and the other. So for instance, if I'm over here, I'll keep pressure on this side and just swing the blade around like that. There we go. Works really well. Then once I've got over to that edge, I come round the other way. It's easy to tip it, so we've got to be fairly careful. Right, that's a good first cut. Now before I go any further, I want to relieve these corners, so I'm just going to put the chisel in flush against this surface here, make some decent cuts downwards. This will mean that the router plane shavings will peel off nice and neatly from those corners. Right, now we can advance the depth stop a little bit more, just to be very careful with this. What I like to do is hold it with my finger like that, slacken the knob, rotate it down a bit, tighten it up again, then have another go. Maybe not quite enough, let's try again. I want to make a decent cut, I don't want to be too wimpy about it. So there's a couple of ways of doing it. You can apply pressure on one side like this, swing it like that, apply pressure on the other side and swing it like that. Or if you've got good bearing on both sides, you can just push forward. Now, I might be getting close. I can look at my depth gauge and see that I've got a good 2 millimeters to go, so let's just get on with it. That's a nice big cut. So I'm careful along the edges so that I don't tip it. And once I'm in, I can push quite aggressively past the middle towards the other side, putting plenty of weight downwards on the knobs. Just sort of peel the edges away to get it started. And we can just come through. So this finger's just holding the blade up against the top of this part here. Now I've only got about a millimetre left of my depth to do, so what I'm going to do is just half that. Just turn the adjustment knob till I've taken away almost all of it. I want to leave the last cut to be a nice light cut. So this is the penultimate cut. That's nice and tight. There we go. Start by peeling along the edge. So you've got one nice long strip peeled off, and we can start moving in towards the middle. Right, final cut. Now, to set this, I'm going to need to be quite careful. First of all, get the right way up, slacken the knob, and I'm just going to turn the adjustment knob until I can feel the depth adjuster just seat. If I keep turning, I'll just strip right through the depth adjuster, and there's no point in doing that. That's nice and tight. So now I should have just a nice light final cut for my final depth. That feels really nice. Just peel it off again and go right through. Flip it round. And there we go. If I move that around, you can see it's not touching anywhere. Okay, so now I'm quite confident that this surface here is not only nice and flat, but it's exactly 17 millimeters lower than this surface, the reference edge, and so this is now the reference edge of the tenon. These two surfaces are now parallel. Now you'll notice that I've not touched the edges left, right next to my nice neat marked line. I'm going to leave that, and I'm going to leave it in all round until I've finished cutting out the tenon, and then I'll come back and finish them off. This 2 or 3 millimeters of wood left is protecting the edge, and I want to preserve that. So now I can go around and cut out the rest of the tenon. Before I turn the piece over, I'm just going to take the opportunity to mark up for my 15 millimeters in this surface and stick some masking tape on. And again, all this tape is doing is giving me a nice big visual reference to avoid cutting too deep with the saw. Okay, I'm just going to mark up some lines for my saw cuts. Now I'm referencing off a face side, and it's not really the right thing to do, but these lines are just for saw cuts. Good. just nip it up to the depth stop, which is about there, and tight, and we'll get feathers off of this. There we go. You can hear the difference in the sound. And we can go quite far. It's all just strings coming off. Now this is the reference side tenon face. This is the reference edge tenon face, and I've finished these to the finished depth. This is 17mm, and I'm not going to touch them again now, but the other two sides I'm going to finish off maybe a bit less, like 16mm, and I'll use those sides to fine tune the fit of the tenon in the mortise. So I'm just going to go ahead and carry on and finish the other two sides. Now I was thinking about this and I realised that I might have made a little bit of an error, but it's not insurmountable. You see this line here, this knife line here, that represents the end of the tenon, so that's at the 77mm mark. Now when I cut this line, I had the bevel of my knife on what I was calling the waist side, and I was calling this side the waist side, but that's not the waist side. This is the waist side here, because this is the part that's been cut off. And so I need to make sure that I use my saw and cut on this side of the line. And in fact, and then I realised that I didn't need to use 4 saw cuts to remove this waist. If I put a saw cut here and a saw cut there, and then one more in the middle somewhere, I can only have 2 channels needing removing by the chisel, and I can use a wider chisel, a 38mm chisel. So I'm going to correct this now with this side and that side, and then I'll continue with the new process for all the other tenons, and it'll save me a little bit of time. Right, so I've sawn away that sliver. It's probably about 4 or 5mm. There are some marks left on the tenon from the previous cut, but that's okay, they'll be completely hidden. And this area here will probably end up being cut away anyway once I trim the tenon, once it's fitted. I've cut the saw line slightly deeper than the depth of the tenon, that's okay, this is going to be cut away. So I'll just continue round this side now and remove that sliver, and then as I said I'll continue with this method for the rest of the tenons. Now with all 4 sides of the tenon now excavated, I don't need this end piece anymore. All this was really for was to support the router plane, so I can cut that off now. Now I'm getting quite close to the last few fibres, so I'm just going to lighten the load on the saw and make sure I've got a firm grip on the end block. There we go. Right, it doesn't look fantastic at the minute, it looks a bit scrappy. But I've preserved this line here, so when I've finished all the way around doing it this way, I can take it to the vise and do it horizontally, and then I'll get a nice good clean line. Typical of Britain, you can't escape the rain noise for very long. Now this is how I've set up to do the rest of the chisel work, the precise work. And I'm using a smaller chisel, I'm using this 19mm chisel. Drop the chisel into the knife line, and maybe not horizontal, but point upwards slightly, and then push with my legs, like that. I'm just going to work my way along, feeling that line, pushing with my legs, keeping good control of the chisel. That's barely a sliver there, so let's come along to this end a little bit. Now you notice that I'm starting a little bit in from the end. That's to preserve that line and that line. So So feel for horizontal, drop the handle slightly, control forcing from the legs, pointing upwards. You've got good control, it shouldn't jerk too much. Just using my hand to reflect some light so that I can see the shadow line of the marked line, the knife line. And what that should give me is a very slight polished track where the knife line is. And so now I can just place the chisel on that, lower it slightly, come in horizontal, gradually lowering the plane of the cut. Now, it takes a while this. Are you in a rush? I'm not in a rush. Just taking my time and enjoying being nice and warm in a nice workshop. Storm outside. Doing some woodworking. Don't have to earn any money. I don't have to earn any money. I'm not beholden to anyone because I'm retired. This is what it's all about. You'll notice that I'm preserving this line. I'm putting the tip onto the line, not digging into it. I'm just going to stop for a minute and just check that area with my square, see how we're doing. We're still quite high on the inside, so that's good. So just keep working my way along doing that. I'm actually quite close. I've only got a little bit to remove from the inner side of this tenon surface. Put my chisel onto the polished track of the knife line and just take off a little bit of a sliver. I'm actually looking for a very slight undercut, so let's check that out and see how we're doing with that one. At the moment it's at least square, so that's something to work on. So I'll just work my way along. Polished track, just a slight lift. I think we must be pretty close there. Oh, that's a stubborn bit. Out you come. And there. Yeah, very slight undercut. That's perfect. That's good. So now all I've got to do is to do that all the way around. Now you can see there's a significant lip here because I've preserved this edge, and another lip there because I've preserved that edge. I'm going to flip this around, do the other side, and then finish off here. Annoyingly, I managed to lose the video of me finishing around the other three edges, but it's essentially more of the same kind of work. But anyway, here's the finished tenon. Now it does take a while to cut tenons this way, but from my point of view this method allows me to control accuracy every step of the way. Now I'm going to go off and finish the other three tenons, and then I can start on the joinery for the bench crafted leg vise, so hope you can join me for that. In the meantime friends, may I ask, could you please use the thumbs up button? Apparently it helps the channel a lot. But that's it for this episode. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time on Mr. Lynn's Workshop.